I was sitting here today in one of those rare instances where I had some extra time on my hand. I don't really have to get anything done right now. I'm waiting to go pick up my daughter from my mom's house. She's visiting her grandmother. And I was thinking about the fact that I had extra time, and that led me on a different a thought path, I guess you could say, that eventually came to time factors. And then I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if I did a video about what W.D. Gann's time factors actually are? And so that's why I'm doing this video. So let's ask that question. What is a W.D. Gann time factor? Can we figure that out? I'm pretty sure we can, or at least we can come to a conclusion that's probably pretty solid, right? So let's go ahead and figure this out, if we can, that is, but I'm sure we'll be able to figure it out. If we go to Tunnel Through the Air, Gann's 1927 novel, we go to famous page 78, where he says, "It's not my aim to explain the cause of cycles." Right smack in the middle of the page, literally, right smack in the middle of the page. But anyway, that's not what I want to look at. I want to look at the very last paragraph on this page, because it actually says, "Time is the great factor that proves all things. The measurement of time first originated and is based on the Earth's motion upon its axis. One of the smallest cycles, or time factors, which repeats regularly in things that are very active and have a high vibration, is the 4-minute cycle. The reason for this is that the Earth moves 1 degree every 4 minutes. The next cycle is 24 hours, the complete time required for the Earth to make 1 revolution upon its axis. That is how man measured his cycle of a day. The next important cycle is 1 year, the time required for the Earth to move around the sun. This brings about the 4 seasons of the year. These are the minor cycles." Now, you probably noticed it. It's back here toward the beginning of this big fat paragraph. And it says here that time is the great factor that proves all things. And then down here in this sentence it says, "One of the smallest cycles, or time factors, which repeats regularly." So it's saying right here, Gann's referring to a cycle as a time factor. So it might seem just cut and dry, clear and simple right there. So, okay, well, a cycle is a time factor. That makes sense. Case closed. And while that could very well be, if you actually think about it, he uses the term cycle and time factor, not just in this book, but in all of his courses and things of that nature. He uses them possibly interchangeably, but he'll talk about cycles and then he'll talk about time factors. And the question is, what's the difference between the two of them? Is there a difference? It looks like right here he's saying they're exactly the same. But I think we'll be able to determine the fact that there actually is a little bit of a difference between the two. Now, one thing I did want to point out to everybody is the fact that when Gann was talking about these cycles or time factors, he pointed out the degree, the day, and the year, which he talked about way over on page 371, where he said, at the very end of 370 and 370, beginning of 371, where he said, he had proved by study and comparing past cycles that a time or a season referred to in the Bible meant 360 days, years, or degrees. Okay? So, something you might want to pay a bit more attention to. So, we're going back here to page 78, and we're looking at, okay, our smallest cycles or time factors. What is a time factor? Well, we know what time is, right? The basic concept of it. We might not be able to actually figure out exactly what time is. But a factor, what is a factor? Gann was always talking about how his methods were mathematical in nature, so it seems that we would use the definition of a factor from mathematics. So, if I go to mathisfun.com, which I agree with, math is fun, we can look at the definition of a factor. is numbers we can multiply together to get another number. And then it gives an example. 2 times 3 equals 6. So both 2 and 3, because they were multiplied together, are factors. So it also says a number can have many factors. An example is, what are the factors of 12? 3 times 4 equals 12, so 3 and 4 are factors of 12. But 2 times 6 is 12 also, so that means 2 and 6 are also factors of 12. And then 1 times 12 is 12, so 1 and 12 are also factors of 12. So that means that 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12 are all factors of 12. Okay? And then it goes on to talk about negative numbers, because when you multiply negative numbers, they make a positive. And then, of course, there's factors in algebra, but I think we can pretty much safely stay in talking about the factors of a multiplication problem. So keeping the mathematical definition of factor, because if we go and look up the word factor, it can be either a circumstance, fact, or influence that contributes to a result, or it can be the mathematical, a number or quantity that when multiplied with another produces a given number or expression. I think we can probably stick with the mathematical one, because we could be saying here time is the great factor, or time is the great circumstance that proves all things, which entirely could be possible, might be what Gann's saying, right? But if we look at the time factors in mathematical terminology, what we're looking at here is, Gann says, one of the smallest cycles or time factors. To me, it would seem a definite possibility that Gann was using these cycles, for instance, the 4-minute cycle, the daily cycle, the yearly cycle, as part of a multiplication problem, since he refers to time as a factor in some places, and then just cycles in other places. Like he said, the 20-year cycle, he doesn't call it the 20-year factor, he calls it the 20-year cycle. That's just one example. But if he's calling something a time factor, it would seem that that particular cycle gets multiplied by another number. So what evidence do we have of this? Well, there's actually quite a bit of evidence in Tunnel Through the Air itself, but we'll look at one thing specifically, because basically the whole entire story revolves around this, so we definitely want to use something profound from the book, right? If we go to page 120, and I can't tell you how important that is, but that's beyond the scope of this particular video, so I won't be going into any details. We get to the point where Marie Stanton leaves Robert Gordon. Why in the world would she leave him? Well, I don't know. We never find out specifically as per the story. But she writes, she leaves him a note. Dearest Robert, according to your faith be I unto you. Love will always have faith, understanding, and wait. Time proves all things. She's talking about time too. You will get everything you want. I will come to you when I mean the most, and your need for love is the greatest. Lovingly always, Marie. Now, she wrote this on June 5th, 1927, and again gives us a time, 3 a.m. exactly. Okay, so we can literally cast a horoscope for this, and that will come in handy in a second. Now, this is when Marie leaves Robert Gordon. Okay, and if we go to the very back of the book, on page 407, we get to the last chapter, chapter 36 in the book, and we find that the conference at the end, the peace conference of the world, convened at 10 a.m. August 30th. Okay, now here's the thing. It gives a specific time and a specific day, and we know that this is the conference where Marie Stanton comes back to Robert. It gives us a time that the conference started, not the exact time that she came back to him. And here it gives the exact time that she wrote the note, but not the exact time that she left him. So we kind of have to use those times given in lieu of a perfect time given for her leaving and then her coming back. So if we cast a horoscope for June 5th, 1927 at 3 a.m., and granted, I have it set for the stock exchange in New York City, but that's kind of irrelevant for what I'm going to look at. We see there's definitely things going on here, but if you look at the moon is at 141.3 degrees when she leaves Robert Gordon. Now, when she reappears in Robert Gordon's life, or August 30th, 1932, at 10 a.m., we see that the moon is at 141.3 degrees again. That means the moon is conjunct where it was when she left. And this would seem to be important, wouldn't it? Now, this is referred to as a lunar return. If we consider this the birth chart, then this chart, a little over 5 years later, the moon is returning to its position. Now the question is, how many times has it done that? And it's pretty easy to figure that out. We'll take the calculator here and calculate the difference between two dates. The first date, of course, is June 5th, 1927. The second date is August 30th, 1932. We calculate the difference and we get 1,913 days, or almost 5 years and 3 months, or 63 months. Okay, 63, that's an interesting number. We might look at that number a little bit at the end of this video. So 1,913 days. 1,913 days. Now we notice that the moon has returned to its place in orbit, so we're going to divide this number by the lunar orbital period of 27.32 days, and we find that there are exactly 70 orbits of the moon between these two dates. That would seem to be important, and in fact it is. But we're not actually going to, or I'm not going to get into that. What I wanted to do was come all the way back here and talk about the fact that the moon's orbital period was being used as a time factor because its 27.32 day orbital period was multiplied by 70 to get the 1,913 day time period. So that means in this particular case, the lunar orbital period was a time factor because it was a number used in a multiplication number to get to another number. So if you'll notice in this example here that Gann gives of these cycles, he says the 4-minute cycle is, of course, a very fast cycle, and it's related to the 1-day cycle because if you multiply the 4-minute cycle by 360 degrees, you'll get the 1-day cycle. So that means that 4-minute cycle becomes a time factor when it was multiplied. And again, the 1-day cycle, when multiplied by 365, becomes a time factor, not just the cycle occurring once. So when Gann talks about time factors, it would seem to indicate, and we seem to have proof to back it up, that he's talking about multiples of a specific cycle. Okay, so something to keep in mind when you're looking through Gann's stuff. When he's talking about time factors, he's talking about cycles that are going to be multiplied and inversely or conversely, inversely divided. So well, that brings up a really quick point. The 1940 in The Tunnel Through the Air, or looking back from 1940, why would Gann pick that? Well, in case you couldn't figure it out from here, 1940 divided by 2732 equals 71 orbital periods of the moon. So there's a little bit more insight into that, but don't forget it's very close to 44 squared. So now I said 63. What's important about 63? Well, I'm not going to get into too many details about that at this point in time. In fact, I'm not going to get into any details because I only have a few more minutes left before I have to go pick up my daughter. So what I will say is read the book of Daniel. And before I go, let me point one more thing out here. Close this. This is Gann's Wikipedia page, which is filled with all kinds of stuff. But what I'm looking for here, and what I'm going to show you here, is the books that Gann wrote. Okay, and we're going to look at the actual books, because some of these aren't books, like Face Facts America. That was just a pamphlet. So if we take the year a book came out, for instance, his first one, 1923, and subtract the year he was born, 1878, we find that he was 45 when he released this book. Again, 1927 for Tunnel Through the Air. Subtract his birthday, we find that he was, whoops, I wrote the wrong number. 1927 subtract 1878. We find that he was 49 years old. Wall Street Stock Selector, 1930, subtract his birth year, 52 when that one came out. New Stock Trend Detector, 1936, minus 1878, and we get 58 years old. Then the 1941 How to Make Profits in Commodities, 1941, subtract his birth year. Well, there's that 63 again. Interesting. Now, if we look at 45 years in Wall Street, 1949, and subtract 1878, we get, well, look at that. There's that 71. And then, of course, there is 1 year later, 1950, subtract 1878, we have 72. That's when the magic word came out in 1950. So all of the years that Gann wrote or published, I should say, his books equate to a year old that he was, that actually refers to a number of extreme importance in all of the mathematical stuff that Gann was doing. One of the things you might want to take note of is Tunnel Through the Air came out when he was 49 years old. Look at how much 7 times 7 and 49 and things of that nature showed up in Tunnel Through the Air. Now, I'm not saying that's the only thing that book was about, because it definitely was not, but pay attention to his other books, the age he was when the other books came out, and pay attention to those numbers when looking through those books. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end it here because I have got to leave in just a few minutes to pick up my daughter. So hopefully this was helpful in some way to get you to look at things possibly a little bit differently, or, give you another idea of how to go looking for things yourself. So until tomorrow, this is hwsteele.